This is the scene that took place in the inner west of Sydney just a couple of days ago. Flooding in good old-fashioned Marrickville. As you know, the clean-up operations that are taking place all over northern New South Wales, the situation you've heard about in Western Sydney right now, all of which serious, all of which should have the total focus of our national leadership. But of course, there's an election to win, and somehow the rules don't apply when it comes to each way elbow. You see, according to the latest opinion polls, yes, the Labor Party is still leading in Western Australia, but the Liberal Party is starting to come back. If that's the case, then the Labor Party wouldn't be able to pick up its 3 seats that it desperately needs to get anywhere near 76. So who was on the first flight to Western Australia today, receiving no criticism whatsoever when it came to the media? That's right, Each Way Albo. They even talked about the fact that he had a brand new suit and he got the full start treatment on Channel 9 tonight.
An early arrival.
Morning. Morning. How you going?
A minute after midnight, Western Australia rejoined the Federation and the opposition leader started campaigning.
Renewing my friendship and acquaintance with Western Australians.
Now, does he have a right to go to Western Australia? Bloody oath. Does he need to go to Western Australia to win an election? Absolutely. But what if Scott Morrison had done this? What if Scott Morrison, the second the borders had come down, was able to go to Western Australia? Could you imagine what the reaction would have been? Oh, but it doesn't matter. He's the opposition leader. Really? I thought that every single hand needed to be helping, and unless you're on the front line of everything, somehow you don't care. That's the standard that Each Way and his mates have been screaming for the past couple of years. But of course, there's politics to be done here. But interestingly, Mark McGowan, who is nowhere near the 90-something% that he had when he was the unofficial North Korean envoy to Western Australia, he's now down to human levels of the 60s, but still dream for any politicians. Well, guess what? He's not helping Albo out this next couple of days.
Are you doing any media appearances while
Today?
Albanese is in Perth?
No.
So why?
WA Premier Mark McGowan was asked whether or not he's doing any media with you over the next couple of days. He said no. Why is that?
Well, because the WA Premier has a certain court case back in New South Wales. I'm speaking to you outside his office. We just did photos and had a long chat here. He's a very good friend of mine, Mark McGowan, and he's doing a great job as the Premier of Western Australia.
Okay. There's a very important court case, but he couldn't do anything today? Couldn't do anything tomorrow? Now, of course, McGowan went all in with Shorten last time. He didn't work in Western Australia, and you would think that it says something about maybe what Mark McGowan knows about Each Way Albo, that he doesn't want to even tip in just a little bit of the apparent gold dust. But again, if Scott Morrison had done this, imagine the reaction of the media. Imagine the screaming of social media. Imagine the wall-to-wall coverage on Radio National every single hour on the hour. The former Prime Ministers that would come bucketing aplenty. But it's not the first time there's been a clear double standard here. While millions of people were locked down for months on end last year, guess who didn't have to lock down because he avoided going back into New South Wales and said he went from Canberra straight to Queensland and stayed away from it? Again, imagine if Scott Morrison had somehow avoided the same lockdown situation that affected the rest of the country. But this is Each Way Albo. Then, of course, there's the nonsense of the Labor MP, Stephen Jones, who decided to rip in with great annoyance that Piers Morgan had had that photo with the Prime Minister, and everyone on Twitter thought that it was happening while the Prime Minister was supposed to be, you know the rules, on the front lines fighting everything. But then, of course, had nothing to say that at about the same time that this photo was taking place, guess who was hanging out? Not on the front lines, not on the floods, not helping the Ukrainian community of this, that or the other part of Australia. No. Each Way Albo was at the Pirates' house. Last Saturday, he was at a giant party for those who look forward to taking over Australia in the next few months. But no comment there. Imagine if Scott Morrison was going to parties while the Ukraine floods and everything else was happening. But it's all fine for him. And this double standard extends all the way back to, remember, the start of the pandemic when the Prime Minister was trying to keep us on a normal footing, saying that, hey, he wanted to go to the football. Remember way back when this was the greatest outrage in the world because COVID was doing things in Italy? Well, as you remember, there were crowds at the first round of the football in 2020. Scott Morrison wasn't allowed to go. In fact, it was an outrage that he even thought about it. But Anastasia Palaszczuk, she was allowed to go to the football. In fact, she opened the brand new Townsville Stadium. Now, I get it. The media have picked their side. But the media need to understand that we can see what they're doing. We can see the double standard. And normal people will not fall for the false narrative. They will not fall for the double standard. Is there a difference in terms of what you do every day when you're the opposition leader and the Prime Minister? You bet. One's in charge, one bitches about it. But what happened to all hands on deck? It's all about politics, always. And the media plays its part with what it chooses not to cover as much as what it chooses to obsess about.